Welcome back to another Game Time Discussions. I'm Emery Cuzzy. I'm sitting here with Cameron Selby, and today we're going to talk about Thursday Night Football, 49ers at the Seattle Seahawks. It's a fun slate, except for the fact that the pricing is a little low. I wish the pricing was a little bit harder to make lines for. We talked about this a little bit before the show, but you can basically pay for four of the top guys pretty comfortably and then also still get some of those contrarian value plays.
Yeah, it almost seems too easy. In between my first look, when obviously we do that without discussing with one another, I really feel like we're probably on the same page, and one is going to have one, and I'll just do the other, essentially.
Right.
So, but yeah, we'll just kind of get right into it. It's pretty self-explanatory. 47.5 point total. Seattle is at home. San Fran on the road. They're 0-3 against the NFC. 0-2 of their first two division games, so they cannot afford to go 0-4 and then 0-3 respectively to start that, because they will have a huge hole, not only from a 2-4 perspective, but to even have a chance to win the division, wild card, tiebreakers, all that good stuff. It's a pivotal game for them. Seattle coming off their second straight loss, very shocking 2-touchdown upset by the Giants, who were ahead for the majority of the game. Seattle trying to make a game-tying field goal, blocked, return for a touchdown to seal it. So yeah, both of them kind of backing into this one, but it just kind of feels like San Francisco has the lean. Obviously, as a 3-point favorite on the road, that's a huge kind of swing. You don't really see road teams that favored that often without major injuries, and Seattle doesn't really have any. So, but yeah, 47.5 total implied team total, 25-22 in favor of San Francisco. It should be a fun Thursday night game.
Yeah.
Following last week's banger of a Tampa Bay versus Atlanta, so hopefully we can kind of start a streak going and not have bad football on a solo night.
Yeah, we do. We've seen the 49ers kind of handle this these games in the last few years. They've won 5 in a row, including Brock Purdy's 5-0 versus the Seattle Seahawks. So we will see where we're at when we get to game script. But yeah, it just seems like they are the team that is kind of in the driver's seat in this matchup, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Let me pull it up on the board. Looking at this, you can kind of see the basics of the pricing, and you can see that it starts. Hold on, let me move to flex. It starts at 10-2 for Jordan Mason. Jordan Mason is the highest on the board, but most of these showdowns have had 11 plus players on them. Just to see a 10-2 as the main guy, it's kind of crazy to me. And also that makes it very viable to play a lot of different kinds of lines, 20 max type of play.
That's exactly why I wanted to go the way I did last week with the Tampa Bay Atlanta, because there were so many good skill players to prioritize, and the highest was Mike Evans, 10-2, and basically Godwin, and then everybody else was under 10K. Both quarterbacks were affordable, and basically double stacking quarterback, and then we were very high on Chris Godwin. Obviously, Mike Evans' 2-touchdown performance didn't do much after that, but it was just that was the catalyst, because Chris Godwin didn't go up to par based on the ownership we have with him. And then obviously Drake London had his career night. Kirk Cousins 500 yards, and then you just fill in the skill players of Darnell Mooney, who went off, and then whoever else was in that optimal line, and that just wasn't what we ended up doing. And so it was a small loss, but the 20 max that I did, it was kind of like a little less than even, basically. So that's kind of the benefits of doing a 20 max, is like, even if you're not confident in one specific line, you can spread out your wealth, try to build some and play the ownership game, rather than trying to see who's going to be the biggest stands and then have to take a fade that you don't want to. And we'll talk about it, because there's not really anybody price wise that's just like, oh, I'm not spending up for him.
Right.
But you do have to make a decision if you're doing 1, 2, 3 lineup builds, which we typically do on these slates.
Yeah, we actually talked about that a little bit before the show, about who our fades are going to be, because it's pretty hard to decide on the top guys who to fade, anybody above like 7,000. Next thing though, we're going to just look at these pass catchers. There's a ton of them for the 49ers. Looking at the 49ers first, because they are the away team. George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Jawan Jennings, who has had a 45-point game this year. Kyle Juszczyk has to kind of be talked about. And then we'll do the little $200 parasail here in a second. Let's start with the main guys, though, prior to that.
Yeah, so the only problem with the guys, they're talented as can be, but it's just the consistency is
Mm-hmm.
just not there. Debo was somebody that we liked last week. Didn't play, ended up playing him on Maine. That somewhat worked out because he had one
Mm-hmm.
catch. He had 3 carries, 9 yards. Obviously, a 3-point day is very not what you're used to. And then Brandon Ayuk, who has been kind of a dud all year based on ADP and where he was drafted, had his boom game at 140 yards. And
Right.
Juwan Jennings, who went for 175 a couple weeks ago, had 1 catch. George Kittle, 12 targets. We don't see him with that much volume normally, but he's banged up. Jordan Mason was a very chalky play. He didn't score. He didn't hit that 100-yard bonus, and he ends up with a pedestrian 10 points.
Right.
But Purdy has been consistently doing well and hitting the 15 to 20. And that's kind of the thing is trying to figure out who's the guy that's going to go off this week. Kyle Juszczyk is always fun to play on Showdowns just because, he always has the reception, the goal line, the occasional touchdown. For his first 4 games of the year, he had 1 catch. And even the first 2 weeks, he had 8 targets over the first 2 weeks. And then obviously he didn't have a stat last week, but 1,400, it's a dart throw, it's a tournament play kind of thing. And he's always viable on slates like these. And pretty much after that, like you were going to mention, Ricky Pearsall is not going to be activated this week.
Yep.
So essentially it's just wide receiver by committee. Chris Conley has been injured. He missed last week. And so he was active before. Ronnie Bell has been active a couple games, then he wasn't. But every one of these guys, even Trent Taylor, who all these guys minimum price, have had a target, had a catch. And again, on a $200, that's all you really need is just 1 catch and you're chilling.
Yeah, your guy needs to get the catch rather than any of the others.
And the thing is, even though, whoever ends up playing and is active, a part of those is in the player pool per se. You don't necessarily need to do that because there's not anybody in the 11K range. It's like I thought there was going to be at least 2 guys in this slate that was because if you look back to a couple of weeks ago, the Jets and the Patriots, where it was basically the stars knows who's getting the ball, and then it's just a bunch of unknowns.
Right.
You had Garrett Wilson at 10-2, but Brees was over 11, Ramondre was over 11, and then the quarterbacks were kind of where they are on this slate, and it's just like it was like pick those two of the 3, and then build the rest. Well, with this, there's not really you don't really need to go that low.
Yeah.
And we'll see when we do our first looks how easy it is to just kind of build a 6 that just like, oh yeah, that's pretty viable.
Well, I did want to say we did talk about this on the Sunday slate. If we wanted to get a San Francisco player, we were talking about possibly doing Debo, possibly doing Jordan Mason, and then we were both like, it's possible that Brandon Ayuk has the week. And we said that. We said like it's just there's so many mouths to feed. Someone will do well. George Kittle getting 2 touchdowns wouldn't be surprising to anybody. Things like that. So yeah, I think the pass catchers are pretty straightforward. You just have to figure out which one's going to do it today. And we have a lean, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But if it's Brandon Ayuk, if it's Deebo Samuel, if it's George Kittle, if it's Juwan Jennings, it won't surprise anybody if it's any of those guys, basically.
Right.
Jordan Mason and Isaac Guerrero are the 2 running backs for this team with Christian McCaffrey still out. Isaac Guerrero got more snaps this last week, which was good to see for him. He's been getting more touches, or slowly going up and down in touches, but getting the snaps is always the way to kind of make the difference. He only had 14% of the snaps, and that's actually one of his best of the year.
Right.
So,
and the thing, just kind of a quick tidbit about Kyle Juszczyk and why he is viable, because snap counts are everything when you're a cheap guy, and he has been north of 60% of the snaps in each of the last 3 games, has been above 50 all 5 games this year.
Yep.
And so even though he's not getting the ball when he's in, there's always the check down possibility, and there's always the goal line possibility, and just 1 or 2 of those opportunities is what will help just run it wide open. And if he doesn't work out for 1,400, you nailed the other 5, you're probably still in good shape.
Right. And one thing I will say is Jordan Mason's actually come down in snap count every single week. 81% the first 2 weeks, then 75% week 3 and 4, and then this last week 64%. That's possibly because Debo's running the ball a little bit, of course, because he had 3 rushes this last week, and then also Isaac Guerrero getting a couple more touches and time in the game. I'm not sure if that had to do with the game script and like how the game actually went this last week. Let's see. because that would have been I'll just do Christian McCaffrey because it's beautiful. He hasn't played, so I can't even do that. What am I doing? I thought it would tell me the games against the close game versus Arizona. Actually, I thought that Jordan Mason would have more than 64% of the snaps based on the fact that was such a close game. So
right.
I'm actually surprised by that.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. And again, he's just one of those guys that's been very steady. He's been very extremely efficient, but he's had 3 games where he scored, and then the 2 games he hasn't. Like, he's played well with his touches, but when you're priced up finally, because we've been waiting for him to get in the 7+ thousand range and on main, and then on this to be 10-2 is nice because you don't have to force him in. And there's games where he'll be 88 all-purpose yards, but just doesn't score and gets 10 points. Or there's last week, like I said, he had 98 yards on 15 touches. That's awesome. Not for $10,000.
No,
so
absolutely.
that's kind of what it is. And I mean, if you want to look to the guy that's been probably the most consistent, it's all the way down. It's one of the cheapest. It's at 7,400, George Kittle. And he's the guy that's typically been the inconsistent with targets. But, I mean, targets-wise, he's been kind of up and down, but he scored in 3 straight games. Like I said, he had 12 targets last game against Arizona. But, yeah, he's been like the one reliable tight end on the entire NFL slate the entire season so far. The whole position's been a dud, and he's just been pretty steady. And then he obviously missed 1 game in week 3. So I was actually surprised to see him this cheap. He makes a lot of things work. He's probably a the mid-tier captain to even look into.
Yeah.
All that stuff is very valuable with him.
Yep. And then let's jump over to the Seattle. Come on, there we go. Seattle side of the game. Kenneth Walker's the top guy at 9,800. We'll talk about DK, JSN, Tyler Lockett. What other receivers? Noah Fant, AJ Barner, I guess, Jake Bobo. Basically, after Zach Charbonnet, I really don't want to play anybody.
Yeah, I would just kind of honorable mention, say Laviska Shenault, just because he has barely played. But essentially, if you look at his game log, he's basically gotten a target in very, very limited snaps. So, like the last 3 weeks, as an example, he's played 9 snaps, 1 snap, and 5 snaps. And then if you look at his game log, he had his first 4 games of the season, he had a target, and he had that catch. And so for $400, that's all you're looking for.
Right.
I mean, if you look on RotoWire and you look at the highest values, like him and Jake Bobo and one of whoever the active projected San Fran receiver are the highest value. Yeah. And that just kind of is what it is on slates like these. But worth mentioning. But again, probably don't need to even go down this low.
And then looking at the top guys, you got DK Metcalf, who has had 3 100-yard games in a row prior to last week. And the Giants actually kind of held him to, not very much. 4 for 55. He's been their main guy, main go-to player. I think that he's had a really hard time in this matchup. And we talked about this before also. It's like he just can't get going in this matchup. He's only had 1 game that was actually worth noting, which was like 65 yards or something like that, which is not necessarily going to help him.
Yeah, so in his last 7 games, and this is PPR scoring, he has had 5 fantasy points, 16, because he caught a, I guess, what is that? Yeah, 4 for 65 and a touchdown.
Okay, that was the game.
And then he had 8.5, or I'm sorry, that's 11, 7.5, 12.5, 6, 13. And so basically, the majority of these games, he's under 5 receptions. He's hasn't hit 100 yards since all the way back in 2020 against this very team. And I know teams turn over year, but it can also be a matchup thing because certain teams, like, people just show up for. Like, one of the things that I forgot to mention on the live stream on Sunday was that George Kittle always just kills Arizona. I don't know what it is, but when he plays Arizona, he always catches a touchdown. He always goes for 100+ yards or whatever. Right. And then there's certain teams that just players really struggle against. One we talked about was Mike Evans, who's looking for his 100th touchdown. Well, 7 of his last 8 games have been very bad against New Orleans, and a lot of that's against Marshawn Lattimore and the rivalry and stuff like that. So more often than not, he's struggled rather than play. But a lot of people are going to talk up the 100th touchdown and play him, and so it's like playing an ownership game of just like, well, like you're trying to force something that it could be there,
right?
But it might not be, and I just don't want to be on the wrong side of it, kind of thing.
Right. The get the leverage versus the field in that situation.
Mhm.
JSN at 7,000, finally getting some love, getting his price up a little bit. He has not necessarily had the big plays, 15-yard long, 11-yard long in the last 2 games, but he has a lot of targets. He's going to get a lot of passes coming his way. If he scores a touchdown, this 13 at 7,000 isn't looking bad. He's in the same range as Kittle, so if you want to get off of a Kittle, who I think will probably have more ownership, I would go to JSN.
Yeah, and he was a guy that I mentioned as like a very nice tournament play just because he's right next to Kittle, like you mentioned. And I feel like a lot of people are just going to try to get 4 of the guys 8,000 and above and then have to force, a couple 4,000 or below. And so that just kind of leaves him in an awkward odd man out kind of spot. And because outside of Tyler Lockett and George Kittle, that $2,000 range, I believe he's the only skill player in that range. So if that is the case, yeah. So if that is the case, then it's just like you can sometimes get left under-owned, and he's been very steady with his fantasy scoring. He's had 3 of his last 4 games with 13 points. I don't love that they just use him as an underneath guy. If you look at his yards per reception, only 1 game he had above 10 yards. So that's never fun, but that's basically the role that he's using. But he's being heavily peppered with targets when they're trailing. And so you look at games like Detroit when he was trailing 12 targets, New England, they were trailing 16 targets. Last week against the Giants, it was kind of pedestrian, but he also salvaged with the touchdown towards the end to try to make it close. So very much in play, but also Tyler Lockett, just because, we kind of lean JSN versus Tyler Lockett during redraft, but in this slate, 5,400 is a big price gap and difference. It's a discount. It's a solid value. And then he's been slow and steady and just 10 to 12 points every week other than week 2. And he's still playing over 80% of the snaps for the majority of the time when he is trailing. And so it's a good kind of situation target if we're projecting Seattle to play from behind like we are.
Yeah, exactly. The other guy that's getting, the bulk of the run is Noah Fant. He's had, between the 3 that we just talked about, they've all had plus 84%. The other people that are getting snaps is Jake Bobo. He had 3% last week. Before that, he was at about 30% throughout the year. And then Laviska Shenault, who we mentioned, he had 9% last week. So really no one other than the big 3. But Noah Fant is getting around 60-ish% per game right now, which is really good for a $3,000 tight end. Getting a little bit of that.
I just feel like every time he's on a Showdown site, he's exactly $3,000. I don't know why that is, but he's just a guy that he's frustrating because he's a former first-round pick that just we never necessarily believed in the draft capital warranting that high of a price tag.
Right.
But he just never worked out in Denver. We drafted him a lot as like a tight end 3 before, and it kind of worked out because of the value he was. And then he went to Seattle with the Russell Wilson trade, and he just has not done anything. And so, sure, he's worth a look. I mean, you see the week 3 where he goes 6 for 6 for 60 yards. He gets 12 points. That's going to kill it on a slate like this. But then there's a lot of games where he's 5 points or less.
Yep.
And he's not getting more than 4 targets a game, essentially. He's just kind of one of those in the weird range of just like you can throw a dart at him, but I'm not going to do that with confidence.
Yeah. Is there anybody you want to talk about 3,000 or less that I haven't mentioned? I think. Well, we'll talk about the running backs next, but I just meant on the Seattle side of the ball.
Really, the 2 that I was thinking about were Barner and Juszczyk because I thought they were interesting with the ranges that they are. Kyle, he's always fun to play, and then AJ Barner, he's been pretty much 25% plus in terms of snap share, 3 straight games with at least 1 target, but basically he's caught every pass that it's gotten to him. He's scored, so he has end zone upside as well. I mean, that's
he's just the blocking tight end that happens to get on the field. That's kind of how
the Noah Gray of last night.
Exactly.
And so he's worth a mention. Jake Bobo has had some snaps, but last week was his season low. He went from 30 to 20 to 30, all the way down to he only had 2 snaps last week. So I don't know. Again, I don't even know if you need to go that low.
Right.
We'll talk about our first look one in very shortly, but I didn't even have to go that low for any of them essentially.
I'm going to add the 2 running backs for the Seattle Seahawks. We have to talk about Kenneth Walker. Last week he had 5 rushing attempts, but he still had 14.6 fantasy points because he got the targets. That's not normal.
His usage was criminal against the Giants. He had 2 carries for 2 yards at halftime. Obviously, him getting 8 targets is very abnormal for his style, and that salvaged his day if you had him in a redraft league or something. But it was just frustrating because it's just like I don't think you would be in a trailing situation if you leaned on him a little bit more earlier, and I don't think they did, and it was just a bad game plan, and they just dropped one they shouldn't have.
Oh yeah,
it's frustrating, but it's also just like, are we gonna go all the way up to 98 when it's like the games that we saw in them trailing, which he didn't participate in the New England game,
right?
But I mean the Detroit game, he was very efficient. He scored 3 times, but only 12 carries. But he had to get 7 yards carry. And then last week, trailing the whole game, only 5 attempts. So it's kind of hard to put faith in 9,800 to push all the way up. It's kind of hard. I don't know necessarily what my favorite Seattle player is, but yeah, he is definitely in the player pool. The thing is with Zach Charbonnet, coming off of Kenneth Walker's injury, he was very serviceable in weeks 2 and 3, obviously with 18 points and then 25.5 or 25.7 rather. But then, his first game back against Detroit, which was a really good run defense, he had caught all 5 of his targets, which was fun, but only 2 carries. Last week, only 2 carries, but he had 5 targets once again.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of where his upside lies, is just being a pass catching back and passing down situations. If we expect him to trail, he's worth a play. Probably feel better about him than a Noah Fant in this spot. But yeah, in terms of snap share, he's just kind of hovering around 35 to 40% when Kenneth Walker has played.
Right.
And when Kenneth Walker has been out, he's been just north of 80, and he almost played the entire game in week 2. So yeah, definitely in the player pool and a very nice tournament play.
So let me pull these off. We can always talk about the kickers.
I will mention that right now, the 49ers kicker, the replacement, forget his name right now, but he is not on the slate at the moment. I'm probably assuming that he's going to be added at some point, but Jake Moody, 4,600, he hurt his ankle on a kickoff, and so he will be missing a few weeks. He's going to be somewhere, if he's added, he's going to be added somewhere in the 42 to 46 range. He's worth playing because they're going to be scoring points.
Right.
And so, and then Jake Myers, obviously. It's hard to just predict kickers, man, because a couple of weeks ago,
always wrong.
Brandon Aubrey was the best, has been the best kicker. If you tell me he's going to score 11 points this game, I'm going to play him. And then Greg Joseph scores 19, and it's just like, oh, okay. Yep. So both kickers are always on viable in the slate unless there's just very poor weather or what have you.
Right.
Also, defenses are kind of in play this week as well. Last week we weren't really looking at that, but San Francisco, they're averaging 10 fantasy points a game, back-to-back weeks of over 10, 22 fantasy points in week 4. So, and they had 2 defensive touchdowns, or one defensive touchdown each of the last 2 weeks. I was looking at fumble recoveries, but they get sacks, they create turnovers. They're always in play, and being 4,200 as a favorite, it was kind of surprising to me a little bit.
That's pretty cheap.
Yeah, they're worth mentioning as well.
Like we said, everybody's kind of worth mentioning based on their price. We have to find out who's going to get the most raw points on this slate, because it's kind of that weird situation where you can, even though it might be a high scoring game and you want correlation. But yeah, so let's start talking about our must play. Or let's start with the game script. I want to hear what you got to say about your game script. I know we're pretty similar on this.
I mean, we basically put it in the same implied score for San Francisco, which is 31. I have Seattle scoring 17. I just think this is a game where San Fran comes in focused, that they know they cannot drop this game, even though they're on the road. They're favored, but they've won 5 straight against Seattle. 4 of those 5 have been 2+ score games. I just expect a similar outcome in this one.
Yeah, and then for me, I mean, I had it 31-21, so I gave Seattle 4 more points. They're just the better team, and they're looking to get back on track after losing to Arizona last week in a weird way. Both teams are actually, like we said earlier, going on the downhill, kind of rolling downhill right now, and they both need this game, but I think the 49ers need it more for all the stuff we talked about at the beginning. 31-21 San Francisco, and that's kind of how I see it. The next thing, your must play. Let's hear it.
Yeah, so we are kind of similar back to lock and step in this one. So you filled yours out before I was able to, but Debo was the guy that I was like, we need to get to as a skill player. But I think you also need to pair him with Brock Purdy because it's really easy to pair him with his options. I feel very comfortable doing that. And essentially, if I have them implied scoring 4 touchdowns, I think it's highly unlikely he's not going to be involved on at least 2.
Mm-hmm.
And when he is involved on 2, that means he's going to have 20 plus points and he's going to be in the optimal line.
Yep. So I had Debo also, as Cam said. 8,800 just feels way too cheap in my personal opinion.
I'm hoping because people are just like, oh, 3 points last week, I don't want to play you. And then he's under 50% owned. And then we just can prosper and maybe even get a little overweight at the captain spot as well.
Yeah, I want to play him the captain a lot. So fades are really hard on this slate. I want to know kind of why. So I know why you picked. Let's see. I want to fade Brandon Ayuk personally. I want to fade Brandon Ayuk. I don't think I can. I don't think it's a full fade type of slate. I think this is going to be where we go into our Discord later on, and if you aren't in there, go get in there. But we're going to put a 20 max in there probably for this slate, and you're going to have some of Brandon Ayuk. But I would love to full fade Brandon Ayuk.
Yeah, so it's interesting with them because, I even look at because now we're starting to get more of a sample size, so we can look at previous 5 games instead of just being like, oh, what has he done historically against the 49ers in 2021 and stuff like that don't really correlate as much as just what happened.
Yeah.
And, with San Francisco, other than them allowing a long touchdown to Justin Jefferson when he finishes 4 for 133, they've really just kind of held wide receiver ones in check. I mean, Garrett Wilson had a good first drive and then was a non-factor the rest of the game. Was very disappointed hitting unders because it lost us a lot of money week 1. Obviously, the Rams played without Puka and Cooper, so there wasn't great sample size, but nobody had over 4 receptions as a receiver. New England doesn't count because they have a terrible receiving core. But even last week, Michael Wilson had a good game, but Marvin Harrison, 2 catches, 36 yards on 7 targets. So basically, they're just kind of saying that you're going to have to let the others beat you.
Right.
And so with DK being 9,000, he's just kind of the odd man out to me because both quarterbacks are in that range. You have Debo in that range. And then right below them, Ayuk and Kittle and all these guys. And so it's just like, if I can pick 4 of these guys, I think picking him is going to force me to only pick 3. And that's kind of something that I just don't want to go down if I'm building lines this week.
Gotcha. The other guy that I was thinking about was a crazy thought, but it was Kenneth Walker because of the fact that if they are down and their terrible game script by their coaching staff is the only reason I think he gets put in there. Just because if he only gets 10 rushing attempts, I don't know that he's viable at that point. I feel like you can get away from him at 9,800 and then get an extra guy, get that extra money to get a guy a little bit higher. But I really don't want to fade anybody. That's why 20 max kind of feels good to me, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, we'll see. We got a couple days, evenings to kind of plan out what we want to do. So it'll be interesting to see if we end up going that route.
Right.
But yeah, I say we get into some builds.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you go first on this one.
No. I know. I think we have the same line. So I'm gonna. Go ahead and just tell me the line.
So with this one,
because I think I know exactly what it is.
You do.
Okay. Yeah.
So my first look was a 5-1 build.
Okay. Agree.
Trying to remind myself of the last guy in and who it was. It was this guy. Okay. There. So Mr. Debo Samuel is my captain.
Yeah. Brock Purdy.
And again, this is between 2 lines, and I think I have one and you have the other. So,
okay.
We're gonna pair him with Brock Purdy.
Yes.
We're gonna put in Jordan Mason. We're gonna put in George Kittle.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to put in San Francisco defense, and then also we're going to put in Tyler Lockett.
Perfect. So we actually have the same exact line.
Okay.
That's exactly what I thought was going to happen. What I wanted to do now that we made this line, because this is probably like our cash line, the line we're kind of most comfortable with. We expect this game to go a certain way. Game script wise, we're all over Debo, his overs and things like that. I want to make a line where we get Kittle at captain, because I think that we're not going to really talk about that one. I know that the other way to do this is probably take him out of the captain's. Or wait, were you not taking him out of the captain's spot? You were
So
doing
so
the
my second line, instead of Jordan Mason
yeah.
and instead of Tyler Lockett, I put in JSN and Brandon Ayuk.
Okay.
So but again, those are going to be heavily duped, and but both have a couple hundred remainder to where if you do have the inclination to go the backup kicker instead of San Francisco defense, I think probably people would rather play the defense than the backup kicker. So you're going to have less ownership. You'll probably be able to fit them. I'm completely fine with that as well.
Right.
But those were the two that it came down to with those builds, and I thought that those were really strong starts. But again, they're probably, like you said, cash game builds.
What I expect also is I actually expect more people to have Ayuk at the captain spot, which is a weird because of the fact that he just went off. They're gonna, if you game log watch, you're gonna be like, oh, Ayuk's back. We're gonna put him at the captain spot. So I think that might be different compared to what we have, just for the simple fact that people are game log watching. But yeah, if they did something like this or put Geno in there instead of Debo, it wouldn't surprise me. But I think this is basically how the build starts every time.
Right.
Now, I do want to put George Kittle at captain because I think, and that means we're bringing back Brock Purdy. We want Debo in almost every line.
You include DK?
I did. He was close.
No, they're right next to each other. It's all good.
I think this is a way to start the build where, now we have 3 San Francisco players. We're on that side. It's going to be different because not everybody's going to be playing George Kittle as their main captain. It allows you a little bit more money if you wanted to get somewhere.
If we went all the way down and we put in Kyle Juszczyk at 14.
Nope, too far.
Is that even necessary? Oh, okay, so we're allowed to, at that point, put in a Kenneth Walker.
But then
we can put in. I would rather not do Geno if I'm doing Kenneth Walker. You can also do a DK and Geno in that regard.
Yeah.
Or you can get all the way up to Jordan Mason at 10-2. That fits as well. But leaving 1,100 on the table when people know if you can fit Jordan Mason in, they're probably going to play it. This is a way to get a little bit different. And I don't think there's anybody in the 2,000 range that I really have like a huge stand or more confidence in than Kyle Juszczyk. So just spitballing here, but that's just kind of an interesting look as well.
So we didn't really talk about our contrarian plays. Your contrarian play was JSN. Mine was Zach Charbonnet. I want both of them.
Okay.
Let's do it because I think it will make this line work. I think this line will work. How much do I have? 10-3?
Perfect.
Okay. So I think that's fun Kittle line.
That is fun.
I think Kittle being a cap allows you the money first off, and then also the insane upside that he comes with.
Yeah, so, I mean, if you look at if you go way back to 2021, he had a 9 for 181 game against Seattle. So he's had some good, very solid games before. Basically, 3 of his last 4 have been over 75 receiving yards against the Seahawks. So yeah, he's in play. Only thing is a little banged up right now, but that didn't stop him this past Sunday.
Yeah, he banged up. It's George Kittle, right? Like he's just gonna walk through that. He does not care. But yeah, I think this is a cool way to build. Do you want to make a different build or like something that's a little bit more contrarian?
Let's do the game of it's gonna be close. So let's try to force a 3-3 build in some way, shape, or form.
Like 24-21?
Yeah.
Okay. So
something close to where maybe both quarterbacks are viable. I mean, where it's easy to fit both in and it's easy to correlate them well. That probably means we're fading Jordan Mason. That probably means we're fading Kenneth Walker.
It's fine.
A little scary, but I don't play scared.
How much do I have?
That's a lie. I totally play scared, but it's okay.
What about 9?
So we have 42.
I could also go down to JSN.
If you went, yeah, you could do that if you wanted to. But if you wanted to, okay.
Well, I mean, go ahead. Sorry. I was gonna say we could do that and then put a kicker and Tyler Lockett in.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of with DK was doing JSN. I'm sorry, doing Tyler Lockett and DK as 2 of the top 3 receivers, and that leaves enough for a
Zach Charbonnet.
Yeah, which that's actually a 4-2 Seattle build, so that'll be probably a little different. But how about you take DK out for JSN, obviously, and what does that open up? 58.
Yeah, that was where we could go down to whoever the San Francisco kicker is, I guess, in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
Or
Just as a filler, or
it's like a weird spot. Let's see. Can I go up, actually, now that I think about it? What if I went to... That's my 34. What about $3,400? Zach
decent enough for
Charbonnet.
a kicker / defense.
Yeah, it's still the San Francisco kicker.
Right.
There's your 4-2. 4-2. You could go down to Noah Fant and get the other side of it. Oh no, I mean it didn't matter. What am I doing?
My only thing with Geno is that if you are going to do double quarterback build, I would highly advise at least one of the top 3
Yeah,
receivers,
for sure.
just because all of them are north of 80% of the snaps. So we just, excuse me, kind of know where the ball is going. And then basically the fourth option in that offense is, at least over the last 2 weeks, for targets is Zach Charbonnet, who's
Right,
34.
exactly.
So that's a reasonable correlation as well.
Okay, 6,050. Now what?
If you put in Sir Zach,
yeah, I think he's going to give us
that's going to be 87. So that
so
puts in
Brandon
Ayuk,
Ayuk, or even down to
George
Kittle if you wanted to. I think that makes sense for a 3-3. It gives you 2 receivers on Seattle, but as a receiver, the fourth option, like you said, the running back, he's going to get 40% of the snaps, but they like getting him the ball. And then you get 2 of your favorite receivers for the San Francisco side and Brock Purdy. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it does.
I like this slate. I really do like the slate. It's just going to be a lot more work than we're used to because of the pricing and stuff like that.
Yeah,
this is a fun game.
This is a game that we might flirt with doing a 20 max. I don't know. I couldn't get him on board last week, but it's not like I could brag about it now because it didn't work out because we didn't have Darnell Mooney and enough of Mike Evans. But
Darnell Mooney, golly, you needed
16 targets.
Everybody.
Yeah,
basically you needed everybody.
But Bijan and Tyler.
Right, Algier, yeah.
It's crazy, but
yeah.
Maybe I'll get you on board this week. But essentially, that's it. Before we head out, we want to talk about our top props of the week for this showdown. I'll go first on this one. Brock Purdy over 1.5 passing touchdowns. This one is a even line on Prize Picks, and it's 0.91, so it's a reduced payout on underdogs. So that means it's really good value on Prize Picks right now. Again, I think this is a 4-touchdown game by San Francisco. Hard to believe that it would be him not being involved on 3 of them.
Right.
He's played well this season, had 2 games with 2 passing touchdowns, and so I just think the third comes here in a must-win game for them.
Yeah, and so mine, I actually, unfortunately, when I put mine in, and if you weren't in Discord, you missed it. Just saying.
Yeah.
But in Discord, I said, hey, y'all need to get on this line now before it moves. It was Deebo Samuel at 53.5. As I scroll down, you'll notice that it is not the same. It is now 56.5. That's a little bit scarier. I mean, I'm still comfortable taking it, but I'm not as comfortable with where it was prior.
And one thing I did want to point out, if you are thinking about tailing on a Prize Picks, just as an example, if you look at the payout, right, typically on just a 2-pick, for example, it's 3x, right? Mm-hmm. It's not 3x. So what's interesting is that if you correlate the 56.5 passing yards with the 1.5 passing touchdowns, it's reduced. Mm-hmm. But if you went to Brock Purdy 250, I think it's 253 on Prize Picks, his passing yards, which I still like, or it's 252. I still like, but I think I prefer the passing touchdowns more, just in case it's a blowout or something of that nature. It's
2.5x.
Oh, well, I got a good deal on the way over here then, because I got it for
3x.
Even, yeah.
Oh wow.
So normally you wouldn't think that this would correlate compared to the other one, but I guess both are reduced now. But it is worth mentioning, if you do a ton of quarterback and receiver stacks with your 6 picks, just know it's going to be reduced, and you're taking a little less value than what you should be getting if you win another route.
Yeah, and if you bet it on a bookie, you would get that value. So that's why you need to make sure you're watching that
exactly
line.
Like, especially on underdog, they don't like it when you do passing yards and receiving yards from a quarterback receiver combo. Like, they'll punch it down really quick, and I'm just not willing to be like, oh, I'm confident, so I'm willing to eat an even line to only get 0.8x or something like that.
Absolutely. Let me pull that off. And this one, there's one more I was going to give because mine did change a little bit. I wanted to also throw in the Geno Smith over on Completions, this has hit basically 4 for 4 the last few weeks because when they are trailing, this hits. So New England 33, Detroit 38, Giants 28. They were trailing all 3 of those games. This line always has felt pretty good. It's also currently, if you look at a bookie site or something, it is minus 118 or something. So you're getting some value on it. Yeah. So I thought that was a good one also.
Yeah, and then also, you'll be looking at discounts throughout the week. Obviously, it's Taco Tuesday, so just an example, they have a DK prop for a discount, and obviously, you're not going to get this by the time this video is released. But just wait, because there's Flex Friday deals, there's free squares out of nowhere. They've done that before. All September, they were doing a Caleb Williams free square, and he was playing like shit, but it was still working. So, and especially on Underdog, they're doing discounts every single day. Like today, there was like a 50% profit boost if you played WNBA. They really want you to watch women's basketball, and I still don't want to. But if you do and you're willing to, they're giving you a boost for it,
right?
And they're doing that throughout the week. There was discounts today as well, so just kind of keep an eye out on those every single day as you're building lines throughout the week. Don't submit all of your lines at the very end of the week. 2 reasons: 1, because you're missing discounts, and 2, lines are getting bumped up in good favor.
Right.
So if you like something now, you definitely would have liked it on Tuesday. So always be looking at the first looks when they come out Tuesday and Wednesday, and you can get better value and hopefully better payouts if you're patient with your funds.
Well, that's just like last week. Dontavian Wicks went from 47.5 to 57.5.
Didn't matter either
Didn't
way,
matter. He should have taken the under, but it
was one of those
moved a
things
lot.
that it was a good value even if Dobbs played, but then all of a sudden Dobbs, suspended / personal reasons, whatever that situation was, and then it just vaulted up. Same with Jaden Reed. It was like 53 and then it went up to 70.
Right.
So just kind of things like that. If you catch things early in the week, it'll more often than not work out in your favor.
Absolutely. But yeah, so that's our breakdown on the Thursday Night Football 49ers at the Seattle Seahawks. It's going to be a fun game. Last time we saw San Francisco on primetime, they played the Jets, and it was fun to watch. And so it's going to be a good game. A lot of good players, a lot of players we like watching. So make sure you get your lines in, get in our Discord so you can see our lines, and hopefully we make some money this week.
Yeah, appreciate you guys' time. Let us know what your locks of the week are. All the fun plays. We'll be posting our lines probably 30 minutes to an hour before the lock, which is about 7:15 on Thursday night. So just be on the lookout for that. We'll be talking throughout the week on stuff. And also, we're going to be recording our first look for the main contest. So be on the lookout for that. We've had more success the last couple of weekends with Maine breaking those down. So keep tuned for that. But until then, we'll see y'all next time.
Have a good one.